when a narcissist realizes you don't give a shit anymore. There is a profoundly quiet but revolutionary moment when the heavy fog of manipulation finally lifts from your exhausted mind entirely. You wake up one morning and realize that the frantic anxiety that used to dictate your every single reaction has completely vanished. The endless cycle of trying to please someone who is inherently unpleasable no longer holds any power over your daily emotional state. It is not necessarily a burning anger that replaces your previous desperation, but rather a profoundly cold and unwavering blanket of complete apathy. You look at the person who once controlled your entire universe and feel absolutely nothing but a vague sense of distant observation. This sudden emotional detachment is the exact weapon that a highly manipulative personality is completely unprepared to face in any capacity. Narcissists possess an incredibly tuned, almost predatory radar for the emotional temperature of the people they use for their psychological supply. The very second your baseline emotional response shifts from anxious accommodation to total indifference, their internal alarm bells begin ringing with deafening intensity. They are entirely dependent on your ongoing reactions to validate their distorted sense of grandiosity and their deeply fragile internal self-worth. When you stop giving a shit, you are effectively cutting off the primary oxygen supply that keeps their false persona breathing and alive. Initially, they will simply assume you are playing a temporary game or experiencing a fleeting mood that they can easily manipulate away. They deeply believe that their established control over your mind is permanent, and that your sudden distance is just an easily solvable glitch. To correct this perceived glitch, the narcissist will inevitably launch a calculated campaign of provocations designed to spark any kind of emotional reaction. They might suddenly drop a backhanded compliment or bring up a deeply sensitive past grievance just to see if you will finally flinch. If anger fails to produce the desired result, they will abruptly pivot to a sickeningly sweet phase of aggressive and desperate love bombing. You will receive sudden outpourings of affection and grandiose promises of absolute change that would have completely melted your heart just months ago. However, because you have finally seen behind the curtain, these desperate theatrical performances now only strike you as painfully transparent and honestly exhausting. You watch them cycle through their entire repertoire of manipulative tactics, with the detached fascination of a scientist observing a deeply predictable experiment. As your total lack of reaction stretches from days into weeks, a profound and terrifying confusion begins to take root within the narcissist's mind. They cannot conceptually process the idea that someone they viewed as an easily controlled extension of themselves is suddenly operating with complete autonomy. Your unbothered silence forces them to directly confront the terrifying emptiness of their own reflection, which is a sensation they spend their lives avoiding. In their rigid worldview, they are the main character of reality, and your refusal to participate in their ongoing drama completely shatters that illusion. They will start to desperately question their own methods, wondering if they have somehow lost their magical touch for bending others to their will. This cognitive dissonance creates a deeply uncomfortable psychological friction that rapidly deteriorates their usually calm and carefully manufactured external facade of confident superiority. This terrifying realization of lost control almost always triggers what psychologists commonly refer to as a dramatic and destructive extinction burst. An extinction burst is a sudden extreme escalation in manipulative behavior that occurs right before the controlling patterns permanently burn themselves out entirely. The narcissist will launch completely baseless accusations, aggressively orchestrate elaborate smear campaigns, or even feign a sudden personal crisis to demand your attention. They are throwing absolutely everything at the wall in a blind, frantic panic, hoping that just one tiny hook will somehow catch your emotions. It is incredibly vital during this chaotic phase that you maintain your stoic indifference and absolutely refuse to engage with their manufactured madness. Responding to their outrageous provocations, even just to defend yourself, instantly provides them with the exact energetic supply they are so desperately craving. When the aggressive extinction burst inevitably fails to break your rock-solid boundaries, the narcissist will swiftly transition into playing the ultimate tragic victim. They will weave elaborate tales for anyone who will listen about how cruelly and coldly you abandoned them after they gave you absolutely everything. This pathetic public performance is designed to simultaneously salvage their severely bruised ego and potentially guilt you back into your former position of servitude. You will likely hear through mutual acquaintances how devastated they are, how much they have fundamentally changed, and how deeply they regret losing you. By remaining completely unmoved by these carefully crafted sob stories, you reinforce the impenetrable fortress of your own long overdue emotional and psychological healing. You understand now that their tears are not expressions of genuine sorrow, but rather deeply cynical tools used exclusively for regaining lost territorial control. Ultimately, your unwavering apathy inflicts the most devastating psychological wound possible, which is universally known in clinical terms as a severe narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury occurs when their fragile delusion of ultimate omnipotence is abruptly punctured by the undeniable reality of your complete and utter indifference. Unlike a normal emotional heartbreak, this specific injury strikes at the very core foundation of their carefully constructed and fiercely protected false identity. They are forced to subconsciously recognize their own absolute powerlessness, a terrifying realization that causes their fragile ego to fracture and painfully collapse inward. Because they completely lack the emotional maturity required for genuine introspection, they will process this profound failure entirely as an unforgivable betrayal by you. They will permanently rewrite history to cast you as an unfeeling monster, simply to avoid taking any accountability for their own abusive behavioral patterns. It is extremely important to recognize that your newfound apathy is not a punishment you are actively inflicting upon them out of malicious spite. Rather, your total indifference is simply the natural, unavoidable consequence of your own desperate mind finally choosing self-preservation over continuous, exhausting emotional destruction. You have simply stopped pouring your incredibly valuable life force into a bottomless emotional black hole that can never actually be filled or satisfied. Your silence is essentially an energetic boundary that powerfully declares you are no longer available to serve as a psychological punching bag for their insecurities. This state of not giving a shit is actually the highest and most profound form of radical self-love and essential psychological boundary setting. You are purposefully reclaiming all the beautiful energy you previously wasted on their endless drama and redirecting it back into your own wonderful life. Moving forward, you will begin to experience a deeply profound sense of quiet liberation that washes over every single aspect of your daily existence. The terrifying shadow that once loomed over your every decision and completely dictated your daily mood gradually evaporates into the bright light of reality. You will suddenly find yourself enjoying remarkably simple pleasures again, entirely free from the constant, exhausting hypervigilance of anticipating the narcissist's next manipulative attack. Your nervous system, which spent months or even years stuck in a highly elevated state of fight or flight, finally begins to beautifully regulate and relax. The ultimate victory over a narcissistic abuser is never achieved by winning an argument, but rather by completely removing yourself from their toxic battlefield. By simply realizing that you truly do not give a shit anymore, you have undeniably won the most important war for your own precious soul.